see the steam coming out.
Perfect.
We're recording.
This Finance Committee meeting, Pasco City Council will come to order pursuant to public announcement. Kathy, call the roll, please.
Barstow,
Here.
Powell,
Here.
Walther,
Here.
Mr. Nicholson, good evening. He's also present with us. I assume the Finance Department has an agenda for us this evening, and,
It's on your desk, it says May 21st, it's the same agenda.
okay?
Okay, just a quick update, I was gonna make my report out before I left for vacation, but the auditors have blessed the report. We're waiting for the copy to be sent to the auditor states. Officially, it's not released until the auditor state says, oh, yes, we agree, no problems. So that's kind of the next step, but once we get that, then we'll publish it on the SEC's website for continuing disclosure requirements, as well as using that information for the PAFR, the Popular Annual Financial Report, which we'll get out shortly thereafter. So we're pleased. No management comments, no citations, no findings for recovery. So once again, a clean audit, which is fantastic. We're pleased.
Good.
Well, this is kind of a number 4, the finance department relocation. You know, we're done. We're down there. We're all settled in, so it's working out real well. If you turn the page, you'll see the proposed budget schedule, which again pretty much just mirrors the last 2 or 3 years' schedule, just tweaking a day or two here or there to fit where it fell in the week. I guess the one question that we would need would be the hearings, what public, what kind of public discussion you wanted to have. We also have a workshop plan scheduled tentatively for September 24th, if that still works.
Okay. Well, I think unless the committee has any other ideas, we can just bring that up this evening as our recommended date and see how that, if that's good with council, if we can be there. It interferes with anybody's plans or anything, we can work around it.
And this would once again get us with 3 readings and anticipate passage right before Thanksgiving, so everybody can enjoy the holiday and the holidays and have the legislation already put to bed.
Well, it still gives us, if we have to,
Yep.
one more meeting if we need it. So-
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Mr. Powell, Mr. Walther, any issues with the schedule? I mean, you see any problems or anything potentially?
I don't have any comments.
Okay. Okay.
And we're currently progressing down that path. We already have the capital planning tools out to the departments. And I'm starting to work on the budget, the salary and wages and all the other, the models, the templates for them to work on that.
Okay. Well, we can pick our, if we need to do a review or a public hearing, we can pick that in that month-long period in September, if we get to see how we're doing. So, okay, great. All right.
Next item, potential income tax language changes. Over the years, we've had a number of taxpayers, individuals who have paid taxes to us that find out that they don't actually live in the city. So they have a Pataskala mailing address, but maybe they're in one of the townships. The problem is, legally, according to our tax code, which is the same as most everybody's tax code, I'm only permitted to go back 3 years. So if you've done it for the last 5 years, let's say, I can't refund those 2 years. And for someone who didn't owe it in the first place, that seems somewhat unfair to not be able to remit their money. However, if I make an exception, then I open myself up to liability because the tax code says that I can't. So I guess one of the things I wanted to bounce off this group is to see if there would be interest in supporting me working with the law director to see if we can either increase it or say basically that if there was never a liability to begin with, in other words, you didn't owe any taxes because you're not a resident, we would be able to refund those monies.
Is this only gonna be for people who are non-residents, or is this gonna be for people who, what about for people who dispute their taxes? Maybe they were paying tax on income that was otherwise taxable to the feds, but it's not taxable here or something?
So an error rather than, maybe they didn't have the liability only because they didn't live here, but they didn't have a liability because there was an error in their tax filing. I would agree, that's exactly where I was going with that.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to have Brian look at the current tax code and see how we would modify that.
'Cause we're-
Typically, I think it's, I mean, we don't go back any farther than 7 years, I don't think, anyway. So if somebody were to say, well, back in 2011, you're like, well, that's,
Well, yeah, that becomes a hardship on the city to actually do that,
yeah.
to go further, I would say.
Well, I would say, yeah, I mean, at some point, I think it's up to the taxpayers to figure out that I don't owe it, or I was paying it on something I should have been paying it on.
Right.
A stream of income.
And so
Don't we
maybe,
have-
maybe it's 5 years, I don't know what the
But,
measurement would
yeah.
be.
But don't we have it should be, well, don't we have a procedure in place where if somebody believes that they have been assessed a tax they shouldn't have been assessed, or they made, isn't there something?
Well, in my previous place, we called it the Board of Tax Appeals, I don't know what the official name is here, but it's the same kind of thing. But basically, you're appealing a finding of fact, it's like any other appeal. So if as the tax administrator, whether it's Rita doing it on my behalf or I do it and say, I'm not able to do that, then you're basically challenging, you know, that I've done an error in, I'm interpreting the code wrong, or I've done, you know, we've done something wrong.
Okay. Back to this original one. How many people, how many taxpayers or tax entities does this encompass, do you know?
I will tell you, Janice has come to me a number of times, just in this last season, we probably had at least 5 or 6 that go back,
Past 3 years.
yeah, beyond the 3 years. And we give them the 3 years with no, you know, that, we have no problem with that. Of course, Janice, to her credit, she's a very compassionate person, you know, that's not fair. I'm like, I don't disagree with you that it's not inherently fair. However, it's the rules we have to play within.
I guess I'd just like to hear more from Mr. Zetz about this. What, should we narrow this to just someone who paid liability that they didn't have at all because they were a non-resident and it didn't work here? Or do we open it up to,
I would be very concerned with the statement of no statute of limitation for refunds where tax liability didn't exist. That's opening us up for a lot of,
Potentially.
potentially a lot of review. And I would be concerned with that, but I agree with Mr. Barstow that, I like to hear what Mr. Zett says just from the IRS viewpoint, but from tax code liability. But I understand I agree with you. If you didn't live here and you sent in a check, you know, and it really wasn't supposed to be ours,
Right,
you know, did we have some obligation to say, hey, you didn't owe this to us?
right.
yeah, and also somebody who, maybe they're paying income tax on a stream of income. They have income, they're a resident, and I mean, they should be, they got bad tax advice, or they did it themselves, they didn't understand that we don't tax that, or what
Correct.
have you.
We
Maybe a
run into-
retiree or somebody who doesn't realize.
We run into that quite a bit. Third-party preparers, a lot of times, they may understand federal, they may understand state, they don't understand local. And a lot of times, that's where the problems come. And we've actually had conversations with the offices where they do the third-party preparing to kind of educate. But sometimes those errors just keep happening, because those offices, a lot of times, can have a lot of turnover. So you're a tax preparer for one of the, and next year it's somebody else, next year it's somebody
Just
else.
copy 'em. I guess I have a little less, kind of their fault in essence, but, I mean, I guess I look at it as, does the city have an obligation, if they don't live here, to somehow double check that, to say, hey, you guys aren't in Pataskala, you sent us a check, thanks, but here's your check back. I see that being more of a reasonable request than maybe the statute of limitations being enforced against someone who either didn't interpret the tax code correctly or filed mistakenly on income.
But unfortunately, the volume, and I will have to have a conversation with Rita, but, you know, the volume, we wouldn't be able to look at every return.
I don't mean it that way. I don't mean it that we should be the ones proactively looking at that. I feel like that has a better defense of, hey, the city, you know, I know I made a mistake by sending this to you, but quite frankly, I wasn't in the city and you shouldn't have accepted it, in essence. I would feel that way a little stronger for the look back being longer than I would if somebody's tax preparer made a mistake.
Because they may have recourse against their tax preparer.
Could be.
And that's,
Yeah.
and that's what I've kind of shared with some of those individuals, it's like, you know, at some point, professional malpractice, if you're saying you owe taxes and you did the return, that's what you're getting paid for, if, you know, if the feds come after you, I tell you, I'd be going after my tax preparer, if the feds come after me for, you know, taxes that I owe, that, you know, I gave them the information, they didn't file it correctly.
Well, I think the sense of the committee is that we certainly feel sympathetic to non-residents who pay in error, but that's probably where we want Mr. Zetz to look at this and tighten up. Maybe there's some other cities who do this, I don't know.
Yeah.
What would be your suggestion for, because I think setting a finite time is reasonable.
Yeah.
What would be your suggestion for that?
Honestly, and not to be mean to these people, but, you know, if you can't figure out where you live in 5 years, I'm thinking that's not an unreasonable time horizon to say, you know, within the 5 years, at some point, I think there's some obligation on the part of the
So
individual.
like a 2-year grace period?
Well, we can go 3, but let's say if we were to expand it to 5 for those who didn't owe, I mean, because they weren't subject to the tax.
Understand.
Okay, yeah, I'm less, and I wanna have a conversation with Brian, because what I don't wanna have is the unintended consequence of if we open a door somewhere and somehow something comes through that we didn't intend.
Well, the person who pays who doesn't live here, you know, they're unless, it's just likely that they're doing that on their own. And after a few years, they should somehow realize what city I live in, because it's not being withheld. Employers do not withhold local income tax. They only withhold local income tax for the city where the situs of the employer is, so.
Some do, a lot of employers do courtesy withholdings.
I mean, they don't have to.
You're right, bigger ones like the state, DCSC, those types will do the courtesy withholding for our residents. Makes the life a lot easier for them, that they don't have to do the quarterly estimates and all that stuff.
Okay, all right. Good.
So if I'm hearing correctly, I'll reach out to Brian, we'll have some conversations about this and maybe bring something back in one of my reports to the council as far as, you know, pros and cons of different approaches.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Agree.
Next item was the RETA non-filing or delinquency program. We had to notify them by June 1st. So I had a conversation with Todd and we decided that we'd go ahead and just go with the letter mailing like we've done in the past. It doesn't cost us anything and it generates a fair amount of money. We almost got $400,000 last year because of the mailing program. So, and it's the least intrusive, so I figure we'll just go again with that program.
Sounds good.
I just have to, do we have any sense, I know I've asked this question before, but do we have any sense of how well we're doing in terms of the world of people who have to pay us income tax that are paying us income tax? As a percentage.
I don't get the stats from the, what they call FTI, Federal Tax, that's their department that handles it, because that's pretty well cordoned off. But I will tell you that I don't think that, and I keep waiting for what I call the new normal collection rate to come in, like we've finally identified everybody who owes and they're paying and we're there. It keeps growing, and which is a good thing. So I'm not really sure if we're, and I don't mean it in the sense of we're catching people like, aha, I've got you, but we're identifying them and saying, oh, you now owe, and getting them in the system on the rolls so that we can send them the documents. I think we're a much higher compliance rate than we were even 3 years ago. Because we're having fewer and fewer that come in during the February, March, April, who come in and say, I didn't know anything about it, I just, you know, I got the letter from Rita. So we're getting fewer and fewer of those coming in, although there's still a number of them. I'm surprised after, well, when we started mid-2010, so, you know, 7, 8 years, we're still identifying people. That was interesting.
Okay, I'm just curious, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And the next item, I just want to touch on briefly, just so that this committee was aware of it. We have been, we were supposed to meet today at 4:30 with the utility committee, but it got canceled. There is a platform. Right now, we receive payments, online payments, through about 6 or 7 different platforms. which makes reconciling and processing a lot more complicated than it needs to be. This would be a streamlined single point where people would be able to, they have an app, like if you pay like your doctor's bills or whatever, you go onto their little site or their app and you can pay it, you can set up, so it'll send you a reminder. So we're having the conversation, but we want to make sure that we're having all the conversations around it. The fee is a little different in how it's structured. There's a lot of information here. I just wanted this committee to be aware of it. We're letting the utility committee take the lead on it. And we're gonna have the vendor and the rep from Software Solutions come in and have that conversation. One of the primary benefits that we get from this is that it's integrated directly into the utility accounting system. So there's none of this, you're pulling it off, looking at the information, keying it into the system, which can be error prone. We've had double postings, we've had things get posted to the wrong accounts. This brings it in automatically, posts it, so it would streamline that process. I think aiding in the reconciling process with the utility. And BJ and Nate and I with Stephanie as well as Janice, went through the presentation and BJ decided that this was, and Nate, this was a good approach. But again, we're letting the utility committee kind of do the heavy lifting on this part. But I didn't want anybody in this committee to, because it does tag on to finance so that you were aware of what was going on.
So I saw in the chart that it has a range of fee. But in the write-up, it doesn't exactly explain what that range of fee means. It says between $395 and $275, or $350 to
Right.
$275, but in the write-up, it says you're gonna be paying a convenience fee of $3.95. What's the difference?
You know, to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure what the $275 fee would be. All the other fees are the other ones I've seen are like the chargeback
Yeah,
fees,
right.
the reject
Yeah.
fees, and those. I mean, we pay the $200 monthly fee for the service. So I guess I'll raise that question when they get here. I hadn't caught that, I really hadn't looked at that number.
I might be able to help a little bit, because I'm on the utility committee, as I recall, that's a function of how much you pay. And typically with these e-gov, or where the government, of course, the government will not pay the convenience fee. It's, the more you pay, the more fee you pay.
So it's a percentage
A
type of
percentage.
thing?
For example, Franklin County and the federal government are all e-filing documents in the legal system. When you file a case initially and you pay a court cost, the more court cost is, the more the convenience fee is. There's a minimum. If it's below the whatever, I can't remember what the percentage is, but then it just goes up, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
this
I
is
think
more
that-
set as it's similar, but it's set, they've sort of done looked at the numbers of how many transactions they have, the size. So it's a fee up to, I think, either $200 or $300, and then if you have to pay more, then basically then the fee would go up after that.
And so we're still in discussion about how much we wanna have our utility customers pay in convenience fees. And there's certain times if you don't pay a certain way, obviously if you pay by check or you come in and pay cash, you don't have to pay anything. So there's some different ways.
So that was gonna be my other question is this an option for the utility users? Can they decide to do it some other way?
Yeah, I mean, we accept cash, we accept checks.
Oh, yeah.
You can come here and do that. Credit cards, though, all credit cards would be routed through this.
And right now, credit cards are, you can bring a credit card to the utility. Can you
You
bring
can
it to
go
the
on to
window?
official payments, you can go on to 3 or 4 or 5 other different websites. One of the other problems we have, for some reason, I don't know why, a number of people, when they get on there, they wanna pay Southwest Licking, water and sewer, and they pick Pataspa, and they pay us. So here we get the money, and it takes us time to figure out, why do we get this cash, and who's it for?
Well, right now, can I pay by credit card at the utility office?
So I was gonna ask.
You currently can.
And if I did, would I have to pay a convenience fee?
One of the issues that
That's my
the
question.
NACHA rules, the National Association of Clearinghouse, is conflicted. One rule says you have to have the same rules for every card payment, whether you're paying over the phone, whether you're paying online, whether you're paying in the office. The same rules and fees apply to everybody. The other rule they tell you is if you present the card's present, and that's the code, if the card is present at the window, you can't charge a fee. So the question is, which rule do you follow? You know,
Which rule do we follow?
well, today, we're eating the fees on the ones at the window.
Okay. The online ones, they're paying the convenience.
They're paying official payments
Whatever,
or
okay.
iPay or whoever else.
Right.
One of the other things that happens is we also have what they call an electronic lockbox. So I have a Chase checking account, I pay all my bills online. So when we first started, Chase would send us a couple of checks, a couple times a week, with a list of all the account numbers and the amounts that went with it. So that was a manual process of doing that. We signed up for electronic lockbox, which basically the bank, so like if you pay online on your online bill pay, some are next day, 1 day payment. They've made arrangements electronically to move the funds and the information versus the 5 day where they physically print the check and put it in the mail. That electronic lockbox, when it's 1 day, they grab it in transit and basically convert that into an ACH. So we get an ACH file, a payment file, as well as the what accounts and how much. And then that can be imported directly into the system. So at this point then, they would handle all of that, although the fees aren't, there are no fees attached to that
Correct.
because it's just grabbing, but it's a single platform.
It's like playing by check,
Yeah, yeah.
right,
But
which wouldn't have.
but it's one less, you're eliminating multiple forms of money coming in.
So the folks who are already paying online at the utility department are already paying a convenience fee of some amount.
If they're paying like,
If they pay by credit card.
if they pay by credit card, other than at the window,
Right, they're online.
online, yeah, they're already paying a fee.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay.
Again, utility committee is gonna be, having a presentation from the vendor, and Software Solution will be coming in, but I just wanted to make sure you guys had this information as well.
What's the cost just monthly compared to what we pay now to host?
Well, there's a couple, in the long term, we would hope to eliminate a number of the, we pay a lot for utility billing, the actual physical production of statements, the mailing of statements, we pay for postage and printing and all of that. The more of those statements that can be sent electronically through this process would reduce those costs. We also pay fees for the F&E payment pros for the electronic lockbox. I'm trying to remember, I don't recall off the top of my head what we're paying. It's gonna be a little bit of a push, maybe a little bit more, not much. But the advantage is that the reconciliation and the elimination of a lot of the risk of error, misposting, double postings or the like, then you're bringing data and just moving it right into the accounts.
I think on the utility committee, we still have a ways to go before we wanna see the presentation, we wanna know the cost to the city, the upfront contractual cost, and then the cost to our customers to do this, and is it gonna be in line with what a person who's paying online is paying now? And the answer to Mr. Walthor's question is, I believe we're gonna maintain the options of mailing a check to the utility department, coming in and paying cash, coming in and paying by check, coming in and paying by credit card. So we're gonna maintain it, we're not gonna force anybody to use this online system. But yeah, I think we have a ways to go on that. These are the questions that we're having too, so it's a little complicated. Okay. Anything else on that, Jamie? Okay, thank you. Well, any members of the committee have anything else? Mr. Walther?
I've got a couple things.
Sure.
One, in looking at tonight's agenda, talking about the budget changes, the extra money that's being asked to the supplemental.
Mhm.
We've had a couple other supplementals already this year. This one's gonna total up, if my math is correct, it's $222,000 plus $15,000 if everybody agrees to the parks part of it. So we're looking at, getting to $237,000 in extra costs that weren't initially thought of through the budget. Is there any, I guess this is just an open question, is there any reason for the finance committee to go back in and look at some budgetary stuff to say, all right, if we're having some of those extras, and believe me, there's more, I shouldn't say it that way. I believe that there's personally probably more coming after this, only through drainage problems and other things that could be popping up here before the end of the year. Should we be, is it our responsibility to look at the budget, intermediately, maybe in a 6-month fashion, to say, where are we on our spending, and do we have to do something different with these monies being asked for these projects? I mean, some of them are pretty substantial. Is that something that our committee, this is the first time I've been on this committee, so is that something that this committee does?
We haven't, but a couple of things, a lot of the requests that we're getting, some of them are unusual. The Mink Street project, which was delayed, and then the Taylor Road Trail. So those are some things that are a little out of the ordinary. They've been parked for years.
I understand.
Yeah, so but I think that's a good suggestion, Mr. Powell. But that's something that, let me say this, we don't, Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, this isn't a criticism of the administration, it's just that we don't hear about this stuff until we get a
This is
supplemental.
going to be reactionary
We-
anyhow,
we
no
are
matter
always-
what happens.
Right. We've
We're
always
gonna,
been
next meeting,
reactionary.
come back and look at what I guess I'm thinking about when I was reading through all that, I was thinking, well, should we at the next meeting, at least explore some options in the budget that says, okay, these were ideas that were in 2017,
Mhm.
for 2000, but really we should put them off because we have spent X dollars in lieu of, or instead of, in these projects that have come up, unusual as they may be. Just a thought to throw out there.
Well, Mr. Nicholson keeps us advised of income tax revenues and other revenues. He's highlighted in his report that those are up, but these are relayed, for example, that one fund is down, which is the Mayor's Court Fund, because of the injury and the being out of work of our Mayor's Court clerk. So he keeps track of that. But that's an interesting idea. Jamie?
The other thing I try to do is, if you look at in each of the major funds, the general fund, the police fund, the street fund, looking at the projected fund balance over the next, where it's going today, those are constantly updated for, when we make these changes, I would update the charts to show that as well, and I do look at those as well, to make sure that we're staying where we need to be. I have no problem working with you on that.
Just an idea for a topic, I guess, for next committee meeting, and maybe we can look at those things that you bring up, Todd, that are, how much income tax have we increased? How does that offset some of these? How are those then applied to some of these funds that we are now utilizing more of, and so forth? So, yeah, I think that would make, I guess.
No, I put that on the next agenda. Take a look.
On another note on the supplemental, the $15,000 one, and I haven't seen Lanier's report, but one of the things that's a little unique over there is that there's revenue. If we get fees, registration fees, donations, whatever, we can't spend those unless we have an appropriation, even though we may have the cash, right? So it's the permission to spend the money, even though we have the cash. So we're still trying to find our way where they match up, and when the revenues are coming in better, there's also demand on spending for supplies and the like.
Yeah, I
So that's the
understand.
one thing. Unlike the other ones, where the other ones were, they're just straight up additional cost. The costs went up because we originally quoted the pricing from 2013, 2014, so it's just straight increase in cost, absolutely.
Or even ODOT.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
in infinite wisdom.
Yep.
Okay, I have one other
No.
item, if we're okay with that.
No, we're good. We're good on time.
I know our first meeting that we had, finance meeting that we had this year, talked about the charter revisions and the different audits that were, or the different audit that was into the charter. And I know we kind of left it as, well, we don't have to do it for a certain amount of time. I want to say it was every 5 years, but I can't remember off the top of my head, or had to happen twice every 6, I don't remember off the top of my head what it was, but it was a certain amount of time that it had to take place. Do we want, is there, I know we're done with the 18, or the 17 audit.
17.
So, and I know there were questions that were brought up by our auditors about what
Yeah.
exactly was it, or is it, that is being looked for. I don't know if there's any more information that we've received.
They're actually working with the Auditor State's office to determine whether that's something that the Auditor State has to manage like a regular audit, because it's unique, and so I've got to follow up with them to find out where that landed in terms of,
Okay.
the Auditor State runs bid processes, so like when we go up for our next contract, they manage the bid process. We don't do it, we have a little bit of input, but that much. And so they're wondering if that's the same kind of process as the auditor state put out the bid for this kind of an audit. It's once within a 5-year period is
Right.
the time period.
Okay.
So we have time, but yeah, I haven't followed up with them lately on it, but that was the last I heard was they were working with the auditor state's office to figure out how this would work.
The charter review is 2015, right?
Yeah.
So while we have time, you're right.
But I wanna get it going.
And we wanted to also make sure we keep it in our, I know you were also gonna look to see what kind of cost it was.
And see that, there were questions raised about what it entails, and they're still trying to, we may be a little ahead of the curve with some of this kind of stuff. So it's, what does that mean?
I'm just thinking about it for budget purposes,
Yeah, and
if
for
we're gonna
cost,
talk about
the
it.
cost is dependent upon how many man hours at what level. You know, you have an entry level accountant, you have a supervisor or manager, and they have an hourly rate, so that drives the cost.
Is there any way to ballpark that kind of cost?
I would hate to, because if they're checking every transaction, it could easily probably double our regular audit fee.
Well, anyhow, I wanted to bring it up.
No, that's a great point,
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I haven't heard from him lately, but now that we're gonna be having conversations here the next few days.
Yeah, we should kind of keep that kind of eyeball on that, because if we can get a cost estimate that we can build into the budget, that'd be great. What's our current audit cost?
It's about $17,000.
So, you know,
It's not any more enormous money, but it's still something that needs to be
right, no, it's,
figured into the administration costs.
exactly, okay.
That's all I have.
Anything else? Mr. Powell, anything? No? Great. One thing I just want to bring this up as well. This came up at leadership, and it's going to bear some further discussion, because I think all the council will want to talk about this, but these supplemental appropriations, they have become, in some instances, sort of what I call a Christmas tree. You get an ordinance number for something, Main Street and the police uniforms, and then all of a sudden, it's like a fishing net. It catches every other supplemental thing, and then you end up with, and this is not a criticism of the finance department at all. You just end up with a sort of unwieldy resolution ordinance that has all kinds of different components. So this one has almost every department, I think, it's got something stuffed in it. Well, I know, but well, I'm waiting. But yes, so we have everybody's kind of got their, the lampreys have come out. So I think that, that's just something I want to talk to BJ about, and Jamie maybe, and obviously get you in on this, where the other thing is that, this is just me talking, is that the directors should be writing the language for the supplemental and shouldn't be looking to you to write up their proposals. They should write it up, and you should be the gatekeeper and say, you can't spend this money the way you want to spend it.
Right.
Or what have you. You're gonna redo it, okay? So,
I'm gonna
Okay,
piggyback on that too. The amount of information that we get for the supplemental is sometimes great amount of information and sometimes very little. I'm just gonna again throw out the parks, the $15,000. I have absolutely no idea what that $15,000 is going for, and it makes, just having been somewhat familiar with that, it makes me nervous that the funding is already small for parks. And if we throw 15,000, it's almost 10% that we're adding to the parks budget through a supplementary budget request, and I have no idea what it's being spent on.
right, as opposed to the $12,000 for the police uniforms and equipment.
That we know
which-
exactly what
which-
that is.
Exactly, and it's a smaller number, it's a much smaller percentage of their budget, because their budget is, I think if you look at it, is the largest component of our budget, is that department. We add up
That's
equipment,
just public service.
yeah, public, we add
capital
equipment,
projects.
and they have the most employees, et
Right.
cetera, et cetera, so.
So,
I agree with Mr.
I'm-
Walter, that, yeah, and it shouldn't be up to the finance department to figure out what Director Joe wants for his department. It's up to Director Joe to tell us and bring it to us, and I think it's up to obviously it's to Jamie to say, you can't spend that money the way you want to spend it, or whatever, there's some sort of problem from the gatekeeper perspective.
Right.
or if there is some reason, such as parks, I'm gonna use that again, where you need some kind of allocation of money to spend it because it's built on fees coming in, then that's something that is extremely important to understand.
Right.
Okay,
That's
that's all, I appreciate bringing that up.
No, I think those are good things that we talked about. Anybody have anything else for the good of the committee? Okay, move to adjourn.
Second.
Roll please, Kathy.
Barstow?
Yes.
Walter?
Yes.
Howe?
Yes.
Thanks, guys.